Hey class, Mr. Shear here. Today we are going to explore and dig deeper into the relationship, interactions, and dynamics between Indigenous peoples of Canada and the early European settlers. So we're going to head back to Winnipeg, Manitoba, and look at some of the important events in history. Every community has a history full of important events that changed the community for better or worse, as well as other events which weren't as important to the development of that community. Let's take a look at some events that have occurred in Winnipeg, Manitoba, as well as the consequences of these events. So event number one was the Red River Rebellion between 1869 and 1870. So the Métis, led by Louis Riel, rose up against the Canadian government in the Red River Valley. The federal government sent military, which squashed the rebellion. So why did this happen? Well, the Métis had been fur trading in the area with the Hudson Bay Company, who eventually sold the rights of the land to Canada. So the consequence? Well, the Métis worried that they would no longer be able to live on this land and that they would have no say in how the new government would be set up. The rebellion led to Manitoba's entry into Confederation, so joining of provinces into a one unified country as we know it now. The federal government said none of the land belonged to the Métis and forced them to move west. The Métis population of the province went from 50% in 1870 to only 7% by 1886. And new immigrants moved in, mostly from Ireland, Scotland, and England. Now, event number two was the arrival of the Canadian Pacific Railway, and this was in 1877. So Winnipeg campaigned to be included in the routes of the proposed new Canadian Pacific Railway, which would link the country's provinces. Why did this happen? Well, Winnipeg businessmen felt that the city needed to be more connected to the world for it to grow prosperous, so in other terms, wealthy, and convinced the federal government that Winnipeg was the perfect location for a stop. So what consequences were of importance here? The population of the city grew from 200 in 1870 to 20,000 by 1886. And remember, all this was happening while the Métis population declined steadily. CPR, or the Canadian Pacific Railway, was given much land by the federal government, which they sold to new immigrants in the area. And businesses grew quickly as all CPR trains now had to stop and load or unload their goods in the city. Winnipeg became the center of trading in the country. So now that you have been introduced to two important events in the history of Winnipeg and Manitoba, make sure you follow this up by describing the impacts in your response questions. Okay? We'll talk to you later.